The following piece is not, I repeat, not a researched piece. I did not go to various parts of Grenada to seek information. It stems from my mind, my memory. And yes, I welcome you to put your story, add to what I am about to say. The street you're looking at there is the famous St. John Street in Grenada. Right at the top, you see the Catholic Cathedral, St. John Street. I've written about St. John Street separately. And now, to a little walk from my memory, a little walk down memory lane. So join me as I take you back in time. It is not organized as it should, and you can even call it bits and pieces. Some of the names you'll see I mention here is only surnames, and you can put in the names, the full names of the people. Mr. Sebert Dikoto, he made mattresses near the Arms House on Locust Street. There was a house called the Arms House. You can read about that in John Angus's book, Grenada, that he wrote about Grenada, A to Z on Grenada history, John Angus Martin. Have you ever heard of the Arms House? Father Emmanuel taught the youth how to play the steel pan. Nen Kate, you remember Nen Kate? Well, she religiously lit the candles in the Catholic Cathedral. Miss Eve, a woman called Miss Eve, sold nut sweetie near Mother Rose School. Mr. Morissette and Cutty were barbers. Who remembers Cutty? My good friend Clarence Reds was a very good barber too. Mr. Sylvester, what a wonderful photographer he was. Still have a picture he took of me and my brothers. Tommy Lee from Terry Street. Well, Terry Street is now called Hobart Blaze Street. In time, everybody will get a street. Well, you can give me Cockroach Alley. So Tommy Lee was famous for her hot cross buns at Easter time. You ever had a hot cross bun? And she also brought food to feed the people at the Arms House. You see, Grenadians were noted for doing kind, very kind acts, and we have to keep that up instead of crowding each other on Facebook and so. Mammy May sold appetizing fish cake in River Road. A Bajan man once said, "Ma, you ever had Mammy May's fish cake? Or if you never had Mammy May's fish cake, Ma, you never eat yet." Mr. Bartholomew sold an appetizing fonte. I spoke about fonte in one of my pieces. You know, I've written 4 books, documented various aspects of Grenada's history. And I mention it from time to time, fonte, sort of a ginger cake. And Mr. Bartholomew sold that appetizing fonte in St. John Street, featured in this piece, the street itself. A woman called Miss Doris, well, she sold blood pudding, and Miss Chase, a certain Miss Chase, also sold pudding at the bottom of St. John Street. That's blood pudding. My mother, Georgiana de Riggs, made tambourine balls and other goodies, a sugar cake and something called stuffage. My Rubes also made and sold tambourine balls. And who can forget Miss Gertie's Nigger Boy Sweetie? Yes, that was the name, eh? Nigger Boy Sweetie. A hard sweetie she made on the carnage. Certainly a mouth pleaser for us youngsters back then. She made a sweetie that lasted in the mouth for hours, but you can't finish all that. Yes, my friends, our people knew the word industrious. We were not beggy, as some people will say today. Old Man Road is Orin Boat. We call it a Orin Boat. Across, we have a way of putting things there. We make our own words. Orin Boat. Across the Carnage to earn his bread. Made his bread the old-fashioned way by doing all this hard work. But a man called Preacher Man collected stamps to sell to the tourist. Wakax Band, famous for its music, and Ratty played wonderful music with his trumpet. We cannot forget Broco, the music man from Birch Grove. John Crow, I'm sure you met Broco already. The music director, Switch Dekoto, we must remember. And also Mr. John Hood, who was a talented musician. Lord Melody and Papitet sang calypso in the drill yard. You know where the drill yard is? I know why it was called the drill yard. Well, again, ask Dr. Angus Martin. He'll tell you about the drill yard. And of course, the mighty dictator gave us a popular and enduring calypso, Brighter Out of Darkness. A calypsonian who sang in the drill yard, I remember, was threatened with a lawsuit by a woman after singing a song about pork. He's singing about pork that had hair on it. The woman threatened to sue him. All of the steel bands like Angel Harps that provided music on Carnage. I remember as well as the Masked Men, Away, Bram Patterson, others. You see, Grenadians were creative and they didn't have to have their costume made in Trinidad. They were great wire benders. They were good at that, at wire bending. Well, I am talking about a time when we had our newspapers printed in Grenada. We did not have to send to Trinidad to print a newspaper. I refer to the Torchlight and the West Indian, our local newspapers. I recall a man called Fatty Derrick. He taught me at St. George's Irish Boys School. Very good man. And a guy called Beak. The BB Ballet dancers were talented, with Pamela teaching all the moves. A fellow called Goat, another called Mallet. Good limbo dancers. Boy, Grenada had a lot of limbo dancers. Leon Groovy and Mafu were fixtures on the Carnage. Leon had a brother called Jaguar, who was killed by a man called Leon. Stranger. I remember the Undertakers, Otway, Lacroix, Papa Hines, and Holas. Important shopkeepers like Mr. Selwyn Marshall on Terrace Street, now Howard Bay Street, of course. Mr. Rush, Mr. Jones, worthy of our mention. Mr. Sandyford. They were noted for trusting their customers. It was the habit of letting them have the goods until they were able to pay. Miss Linda Genesee off River Road, also a shop owner. Mr. Sandyford had a small shop on Grenville Street, already mentioned his name. Before that, Pa John de Riggs, who fought in the Second World War, had a little shop on Grenville Street. Pa de Riggs came back. He and his brother-in-law, Mr. Depredine, came back. Mr. Depredine came back from the war with water plugs. Mr. Sandyford was a magnificent painter, and he painted names at the back of wood buses that were neatly packed in the market square. A friend of mine told me that Mr. Sandyford once stopped traffic in Trinidad. People stood in amazement, wondering how a man with no hands could paint signs as well. Today, we have men with 2 good hands liming, or some just begging. I recall a man called Tony selling bread and salami, bread and pig snout, and people sitting in Empire Cinema devouring it while movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly were in progress. I also recall people all over Grenada making fish pots and putting them in the sea to catch fish. To put food on the table, again, Grenadians, industrious. I must mention Mr. George E.D. Freighter's shop opposite Bata Shoe Store. Mrs. Romaine had a shop on St. John Street. Mr. Williams and Mr. Comanston also had shops there. One cannot underestimate the vital role played by people of Indian descent. I always mention that in my books. The vital role they played in energizing the economic fabric of St. George's and indeed the rest of Grenada. Mr. Norbert Nayak had a big estate. The Vienna store sold shoes as well as Gale's shoe store. Everybody's Granby's. You remember Granby's? Amado Frenchy. Hollywood Fashion House. Ivan Wood. A fella played Ivan Wood one carnival. No matter that piece of wood in front of him. Played Ivan Wood. And Charles of Grenada. There were stores. Mr. Balgobin sold an appetizing roti. Nice roti, Mr. Balgobin. Those who sold in the market included Macme Philip, and Mrs. Frederick was also famous for her roti. Yeah, Balgobin had a restaurant in town. And who can forget the famous Nutmeg Bar and Restaurant and Rudolph Bundong on the Carnage. Cannot omit that. The delicious chicken snack pleased many a palate. Franco and Nick's, of course. People enjoyed ice cream from Franco and Nick's. Yes, Pebbles came later. Mr. Maitland had a place near the tunnel, sold ice cream. Well, when we could not afford the ice cream, we just bought the cone and we called that George. Yes, when we could not afford the ice cream, we bought the shell, the cone shell. And we were happy with that. Mr. T.E. Noblesmith used to leave his window open so people without television could look in and see American shows like Bonanza. Imagine that. Cared for other people. He left his window open so people could see. See, in those days, there were not many television around. Now, I remember the famous headmasters and teachers, Mr. J.W. Fletcher, Mr. Jerome Barnett, Mr. Lennox Phillip, Mr. Morris, Mr. Eli Peters, Mr. Duncan and Sotes, Sir Aro Palmer, Mr. Heinze of the famous Heinze School, Mr. Batiste, people call him Daddy Bakes, of the Grenada Boys Secondary School and later of the Anglican High School, Teacher Blanche, Teacher Vi, Brother Leonard of the Presentation, Brothers College, Sister Gabriel, Mason of the St. Joseph Convent. And all those teachers, I can't mention them all here, take the whole time. All those teachers who instilled discipline. You know, while I was growing up in Grenada, all students had to walk on a road called the Straight and the Narrow. And when they strayed, the teachers used a leather belt to remind them where the road was. Sometimes, well, a ruler was used to. I think of Mr. Green, who was a gifted blacksmith operating from his place on the wharf. He made horseshoes, anchors for boats, iron gates, etc. Horse racing was a big event in Queen's Park, Simon Telescope. In those days, Simons. In those days, there was a lime factory on the wharf and an ice factory near the spot where the post office now stands. The sawmill in Guava was in full operation. There was a lodge on the wharf as well as other places in Grenada. Mr. Sion had a mill near Green Street, a corn mill. Mr. Robert Fleming and his father, Mr. John Fleming, were goldsmiths and also they repaired watches. Their businesses were located on Hillsborough Street. Mr. Shorty Perrott made furniture in Paddock, and Mr. Hobby was noted for polishing furniture. Boy, Grenadians used to do things, eh? Daddy Tio was a shoemaker on Granville Street, and Mr. Brown was also a shoemaker. Mr. Walker, another shoemaker, did his work on Locust Street. During the 50s, 60s, and 70s, shoemakers were shoemakers in every sense of the word. They made and repaired shoes, whole sole and half sole were not uncommon words. Auntie, who lived near Marisho Pasture, was a superb seamstress. Wapo was a tailor, Jimmy Lewis. So Jimmy Lewis, well, he owned a restaurant. And the other names like Prenge, Brushback, Holly the Chief of Police, Bodie, Mama Ed, Muffin, Conqueror, Georgie Salab, Big Bertie Howard, Los Howard, rest in peace, Tom Pace, Marquez, Ted Walker, Mayor, Paul Roberts, still alive. The great footballers, you can mention Godzilla, who came from St. Vincent, stayed in Grenada. So what? Gordon Dandarat, Ward, Bogo, the referee, Papa Plug, Ox Johnson, Sampat, Seppi Monroe, Sequence, Big George, Big Dog, Telesford, the great footballer from River Road, Ben Roberts. Yes, I must say something more about Ben Roberts, Mr. Ben Roberts. He straightened out unruly boys. Paul Roberts, Nardica McIntyre, rest in peace. Mr. Lou Smith, who recently passed. Corporal Bartholomew and the Police Boys Club. Who remember that? Yes, the corporal was involved in the Police Boys Club. Would you believe that Maricho Pasture, located in Park Lane, you know where Park Lane is? Maricho Pasture was once the venue of international netball games, and teams from Trinidad played right there. Let's big up the Grenadian netballers. Let's big them up. So just reiterating a few things that showed how industrious a people we are. By the way, they taught us English from England, and I came to America, and they taught us American English. So sometimes, don't be surprised I mix up the pronunciation of some words. So we, going back, we had a zoo at the Botanical Gardens. Horse racing was big in Grenada back in the 60s. Places like Telescopes, Simon, and Queen's Park were venues where horses like Bamboo Flower Carlos and Three Whitefoot raced. The branch people were involved with horse racing. Others. Grenada made its sweet drinks that included Red Spot and Sky High. Mr. Horace Williams' father made a nice soft drink in Victoria. We had blacksmiths like Mr. Green on the Carnage, who was killed in ironworks. Shoemakers and tailors were all over the place. We had a lime factory that exported lime juice. I believe a man called Mr. Shillingford was in charge of the lime factory. We had a soap factory that made blue soap in Tempe. I still wonder how a soap that was blue whitened the uniform of the Presentation Brothers College students. The uniforms, the white uniform they used to wear. Now to the musical bands. Boy, we had a lot of them. Black Experience, Magnificent Six, Rhythm Riders, Rhythm Aces, Madrid Brass. We had a number of combos also. All the Teenage Thrillers. Even the kids performed in organized bands. Do you remember the Naughty Head Beatles? Before pool boards hit Grenada, people played billiards in Grenada. Billiards was played in Grenada, and Mr. Mac Monroe Place and Mama Ed establishment on St. John Street. Come back, boy. St. John Street featuring, boy. There were places where billiards were played. We had a sugar factory in Woodlands that did not concentrate on the production of rum. The brown sugar was used in our cocoa tea. Cocoa salt was a good remedy, yes, for thyroid problems. We got that in the salt pond at Point Saline. We did not have to have our newspapers printed in Trinidad, I already mentioned, and the West Indian was printed in Grenada, Torchlight. Mr. T.A. Marichaud and the slogan, "The West Indies must be West Indian." I remember clearly Regal Reno Cinema, Empire, Deluxe, and other cinemas that pulled us to see the American movies. You know, we had a drive-in cinema also in Grandance area. Who remembers the drive-in cinema? Carnival bands were huge, and it was a spectacle to see the big bands on Market Hill. Grenadians did not have a secret Trinidadians to make their mass costume. We had the best football side in the Wingwood Island. Let me wrap up here. You remember Major Jackson? Well, I call heads. Marquez, big spectacle, boy. That was a big thing to see a football match between St. John's Sports and Hurricane Football. And also a Tantine South Show competition, the Old Trafford rivalry and Springs football. For large crowd, but we all that further gone. The drill yard was once a Calypso tent, I already mentioned, just going back. Who remembers Easter Water Parade, Talanta Float, Expo 69? Who remembers Chinatown? Can anyone recall the swimming races? Trying to go too fast, eh? I want to wrap up. Can anyone recall the swimming races from GRENADIAN to the Carnage and road races from Sotes to Carnage? I remember the time a fellow called Moto Sammy from Guyana, he won the race. It's Leroy Brown, call him Black Joe. Great swimmer, obvious Olympic capabilities. And of course, there were others. Who remembers the Broadway type concerts and plays that GBSS, when GBSS taught subjects like Latin, but in those days you had to catch a nenen to pass the AJC. There was no Google. Yes, Latin students came from the Wingwood Islands for a Grenadian education. One, Eugenia Charles became Prime Minister of Dominica. Desmond Hoyt taught at the Grenada Boys School, secondary school. Later climbed to the presidency in Guyana. Who remembers the time students had to buzz their brains and dig up the limited books to solve problems and not rely on ready-made answers one can Google today? Who remembers kitchen garden and the dredging and spraying of rivers to keep mosquitoes away? Children were given free breakfast in the breakfast shed, or the depot as it was called, here near the market square. Children of poor people were given meals for free. Who remembers the district board, a sort of town council that looked after the needs of sanitation and made sure the cemeteries were kept neat and old government houses were not eyesores. And one that is dear to my heart. Who remembers the Grenada history book? People talking about history in school. We used that in primary school. They taught history, Grenada history at St. John's Christian Secondary School, opened in 1965. We'll be celebrating the 60th anniversary in January of 2025. Yes, we were taught Grenada's history there in St. John's Christian Secondary School, and before that in primary school. Again, I repeat the words of Marcus Garvey, rushing out to finish. A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Remember, the Chinese and others do not go anywhere and leave their history and culture behind. So when they come to your country, you will find more of their culture there. And what about ours? Anthony Wendell the Riggs. God bless. God bless.